Hello everyone. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about paper 1 for the new IB Economics syllabus, where the first exams are in 2022. So paper 1 is now 1 hour and 15 minutes. You have to answer one question from a choice of three. So you have three questions and you need to choose one. The total for that question is 25 marks. That question has part A, which is 10 marks, and part B, which is 15 marks. If you do the math, you should aim to write your part A essay in 30 minutes and your part B essay in 45 minutes. Now, the questions are drawn from all parts of the syllabus: the intro unit, the microeconomics unit, the macroeconomics unit, and the global economy unit. This video will focus on part A, which is the 10-mark question that you should aim to answer or write an essay in 30 minutes. Here on the other side is basically the mark bands that the IB have published as part of the subject guide. As you can see, there are 5 levels. So there's level 1, which is 1 to 2 marks, level 2, 3 to 4 marks, all the way to level 5. Level 5 is the highest, that's between 9 and 10 marks. Now, I'm assuming everybody wants to access level 5, because even if you don't access level 5, you might, land on level 4 or maybe a high level 3, right? So basically, this video is basically me explaining how do you construct your essay in order to land on level 5. As you can see, to access level 5, you need to show that the specific demands of the question are understood and addressed, that you have understood the specific demands of the question and you have addressed them. Okay, you need to show that relevant theory is fully explained. You have fully explained all relevant economic theory. You need to show that relevant economic terms are used appropriately throughout the response. Okay, you have identified the relevant key terms and used them appropriately throughout the response. And where appropriate, you have drawn a relevant diagram and fully explained it. You have included a relevant diagram and fully explained it. I summarize this as the DEDU framework. So how do you structure your response? You DEDU. The first D stands for define key terms. You define relevant key terms. You explain relevant theory. You draw the relevant diagram or diagrams, and you make sure that throughout all of this, you have understood the diagram, the theory, and the definitions that are relevant, and you've linked it all back to the question. So DEDU. Let's talk in more detail about each component. So as I said, in paper 1, we do the DEDU. The first D stands for defining key terms. So I like to give sort of like sentence starters or ways to help you structure your sentences. However, this is not set in stone. You don't have to write exactly as I am, but this is just sort of to help you structure your essay. So you can start by saying, in order to effectively address this question, a few key terms need to be defined. Blah, blah, blah is defined as, blah, blah, blah is defined as, blah, blah, blah is defined as. Now, some tips that I give my students. So normally you want to define about 2 or 3 key terms. Don't define more than that. It's pointless. Pick the ones that are most relevant, that are really, really central to answering your question. These key terms are drawn from and most relevant to the question, which is where the role of understanding the specific demands of the question comes in. Make sure your key terms are defined accurately and precisely. You have accurate and precise definitions. Make sure that throughout the study of IB Economics, you have collected definitions of key terms that are memorized. I discourage you from paraphrasing, because when you paraphrase definitions, you might miss key parts of the definition that are really important. The examiner is not just looking for the quality of your definitions. The examiner is also looking at your ability to use those key terms appropriately throughout the response. So this covers the first letter of our framework, which is D, defining relevant key terms. Now, after you define relevant key terms, you have to explain the second letter, which is the E, explain relevant economic theory. Writing something like the economic theory most relevant to this question is the theory of, or law of, or hypothesis of, or concept of, depending on the name. This can be explained as so and so. So some tips. You need to be aware of the exact names of theories or hypotheses or laws. For example, the law of demand, the law of diminishing returns. If you're not sure if it's a law or a hypothesis, you can write something like the concept of non-price determinants of supply. Okay, so you need to draw these laws or theories or concepts from the question. Again, it's a skill to select the economic theory that is most relevant to the question. It's drawn from the question. Your explanations need to be full, accurate, and precise. So your economic theory needs to be explained fully, accurately, and precisely, and you have used relevant key terms appropriately. Remember, all throughout the response, you need to use the key terms appropriately. This brings us to the third letter of our DEDU framework, which is the D that stands for diagram or diagrams. Writing something like a diagram that can visually represent this theory or concept or law, depending on the question, is drawn below. And then you draw the diagram. Make sure the diagram is accurately labeled and that it's relevant. Okay, it's kind of pointless to draw a diagram that's not really relevant to the question. Make sure if you have X and Y axes that they are fully labeled. So if you're drawing a demand and supply diagram, your Y-axis would be labeled price in dollars or whatever currency you're choosing. Your X-axis would be labeled quantity in units. Make sure that all your curves are fully and clearly labeled. Now, it's not enough to just draw the diagram for decoration. You have to attach a paragraph under the diagram where you explain the diagram you just drew. So something like as shown in the diagram drawn above, and then you fully explain your diagram using the labels that you draw in the body of the explanation. So the labels that you've drawn in the diagram need to be used in the body of the explanation of that diagram. Alternatively, remember that you may sometimes need to draw two diagrams. This is not always the case, but sometimes in the rare occasion, you might need to draw two diagrams. For example, if you're showing the difference between the movement along a demand curve and the shift of a demand curve. In this case, try to give each diagram a number. So number each diagram. Maybe the first could be figure 1 and the second could be figure 2. This would make it easier to refer to each diagram while explaining it and making it less confusing for the examiner when they are reading your essay. Now that you have done the D, the E, the D, and you have fully understood the question, you kind of wrap up with a final concluding sentence where you link the key terms, definitions, the key terms defined, the theory explained, and the diagrams drawn back to the question. It's very important not to stray away from the question. So always come back to the question and kind of write a concluding sentence where you sort of restate the answer to the question. It's just kind of a concluding sentence. This doesn't need to be very long, but you need to just think of how all of this relates back to the question. So to wrap up, a part A question is worth 10 marks and you are advised to write this essay within 30 minutes. You do the DEDU. You define relevant key terms, explain relevant economic theory, draw relevant diagrams that are clearly labeled and fully explained, and you need to show that you understood the specific demands of the question. This is to access level 5, which is hopefully a 9 or a 10 out of 10. You need to show that the specific demands of the question are understood and addressed, relevant theory is fully explained, relevant economic terms are used appropriately throughout the response, and where appropriate, relevant diagrams are included and fully explained. I hope you found this video useful. Good luck in constructing your Paper 1 Part A essays. Have a good day.